to China. Illinois is a state that makes soybeans. In fact, it is the #1 soybean producer in the United States. Republican Representative Rodney Davis is joining me now. He, of course, represents the state of Illinois. And Congressman Davis, given the fact that your state is the biggest soybean producer in the country, your district could really be affected by these new tariffs. How concerned are you?
Well, I'm extremely concerned, Dana. We've got to do what we can. Put a lot of faith in Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue. I'm glad that the White House has given him a lot of free rein to go around and figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. But the biggest problem we have right now, though, clearly is China. Let's not kid ourselves. China doesn't trade fair when it comes to agricultural products all of the time, and they certainly have not been trading fair when it comes to decimating our domestic steel industry.
And what about the president? Do you think that he should continue to saber rattle? Should he, he's threatened again $100 billion, as I mentioned, in new tariffs against China. That could hurt your constituents in a very big way.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of saber rattling when it comes to global trade. I'd rather see people sit down together and work out our differences. That's why I hope that the administration gives Secretary Perdue and our negotiators the ability to take the weeks necessary to work with China to figure out how we can get fair trade agreements. But Dana, I don't think it should surprise anyone that President Trump feels this way about trade with China. He was abundantly clear during the last election how he felt about unfair trade and the trade imbalance that we have with China, and now he's living up to his campaign promise.
Given that, of course, you're right about that. He's been very clear for decades about how he feels about China and the trade imbalance. But you're talking about real people and real constituents there who could really be hurt by the ramifications of this. What is your message to the president right now?
Well, my message to the president is let's make sure we be very careful that any retaliatory tariff does not affect Illinois agriculture as a whole. But let's also realize that there were a lot of people in the domestic steel industry, many of them working in my district in central Illinois, that lost their jobs over the years because China was dumping cheap, subsidized foreign steel into our country and decimated 2,000 jobs at the Granite City, Illinois U.S. Steel plant. And a day after the president talked about addressing the steel imbalance with China, they announced they're hiring 500 workers back and reopening that plant. So people outside of agriculture and in agriculture have been hit hard by unfair trade from China. And I hope the president continues to force them to the table.
Okay, but you said you want the president to be careful. Do you think he's being careful right now with his rhetoric?
Probably not as careful as I'd like him to be, but let's take a step back. When he announced the steel tariffs too, they were going to be a lot more robust than what they ended up being when it comes to China right now. And I hope that the professionals within his administration, including my good friend Sonny Perdue, I hope they have the ability to sit across the table from the Chinese and work out a deal so it doesn't affect anyone, and then we can get fair trade out of China.
And Congressman, finally, just a political question. CNN looks at your district and says it's likely Republican, meaning you are likely to win re-election. But in all honesty, how concerned are you that if there is a blue wave, as your Republican friend from the North, Scott Walker of Wisconsin, warned of, that this very issue could hurt you and cause you and your fellow Republicans in these districts to lose your seat?
Well, I think it's something everyone in Washington and everyone in Congress that represents the Midwest should be concerned about. That's why we want to work with the administration and urge them to do what it takes to address the unfair trade balance with China, but let's not do it at the sacrifice of agriculture, not just in the Midwest, but in our country. But elections are going to be elections, Dana. I've been told after winning a very close race in 2012 that I wasn't going to come back after my first term, and I'm now on my third term. So we'll talk about what it is that we're doing in Washington to make Washington work in a very challenging environment. And I'm pretty confident that if that's the case, the voters will be able to send me back.
Congressman Rodney Davis of Illinois, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.